Welcome back to the Work of Wellbeing podcast. I'm Amy Green, your host from The Wellness Strategy, and we're here to talk about all things personal and professional wellbeing. This podcast is designed to help you become curious and consider your everyday wellbeing strategies, what you do for your own wellness, and how you can start to transform your life both in and out of the workplace. Sit back, grab a cup of tea, maybe grab a notepad, a journal, and get ready to feel really enlightened about what wellbeing used to be, what it is now, and where you can take your own wellness strategy. In this episode, I want to dive into the idea of working hours and be able to bring some clarity, some helpfulness or ideas to the conversation about workload, around how we can identify what is in workload, hours out of it. And I think really post-COVID, what happened was more people started to talk about what their work looked like. And prior, we probably didn't have an insight into different workplaces, schools, education, how that all went together. And now post-COVID, with there being more flexibility, more work from home hours in different spaces, more options to pick and choose when your workday might start or finish, in education, we haven't adapted. I mean, and it's like lots of other service-based industries, police, doctor, nursing, daycare, childcare. You can't pick and choose when you do your work because you have people that you are responsible for and that you need to show up for. And so because of that, I think we do need some clarity around, well, what are our working hours as such, or what does a working week look like? And then when we better understand that, we can start to identify when workload is too high, or this term I stumbled upon called time theft. Now, in today's episode, what I'm going to share with you is a piece of information from the Queensland Teachers Union that was shared in a Facebook group. Now, there's a Facebook group for Queensland teachers, and someone asked, why are we only paid for 5 hours a day? It comes up all of the time, and it's misinformation. It's not accurate, and there are some really clear pieces out there from the Queensland Teachers Union that help to overcome this and be able to think about it differently. Now, I've shared before that my beginning teacher careers and most of my teaching career was done in the ACT, where you're employed as a public servant and your working hours are 8:30 to 4:51. But this piece from the Queensland Teachers Union I thought was really insightful, and I think it helps to unpack some things. So I want to share this with you in a conversation around, well, how can we actually define the work week and start to think about workload and working hours? So I came across this article. Like I said, it was shared in a Facebook group, and I thought, I'm going to read this. And what it stated was the average work week for a teacher or a school leader is recommended to be 42 hours a week. Now, that's quite a lot, but they only recommend that for 40 weeks of the year. And I guess you could say, when you think about 42 hours a week across 40 weeks, instead of the 48 or 46, between 4 to 6 weeks annual leave, it averages out, which is why we get term breaks. Now, it does make the terms quite intense if you're working 42 hours every week compared to the 37.5, 38 that others do. But then if you get 2 weeks break, you can see how that is kind of evened out. Now, what this is actually saying is that based on the public sector expectations in Queensland by the Queensland Teachers Union, teachers and school leaders are expected to work 42 hours a week across a standard 10-week term 4 times a year. Now, what's really interesting is the next piece. It also states that 25 hours are considered non-discretionary. So this is your expected on-site face-to-face duties and scheduled time. So if you think about that from a 9 to 3 workday or 8:30 to 2:30 or whatever it is, minus an hour for breaks, that is your 5 hours a day of non-discretionary time. So that means your school can decide what happens in that time. This, however, in the Queensland Teachers Union is also within non-contact. Teachers can decide what that looks like, but it takes care of meetings, etc. So let me unpack this a little bit further. 25 hours are considered non-discretionary, meaning teachers are expected to be on site for face-to-face duties and scheduled time. An additional 3 hours typically covers things like meetings and other PLC community activities or team meetings. Now, this leaves 14 hours a week of non-discretionary time. And this 14 hours of non-discretionary time means an educator or a school leader can decide when and where and how extra duties and responsibilities are done. Things like planning, things like assessment, things like marking, things like preparation. This does not mean we are only expected to work 25 hours a week, because it states there are 42 expected hours in the work week. Now, let me talk through how this might be structured. 25 hours a week, non-discretionary, must be on site, including face-to-face teaching, playground duties, duty of care, scheduled non-contact time. You need to be on site for that. Then there are generally 3 other hours out of the 42 allocated for mandatory meetings and other things, which leaves that 14 hours. Now, this can be completed off-site. You do not have to be on site for the additional 14 hours. It's flexible based on your need, your student need, class need, whatever that might be. Includes planning, assessment, marking, report writing, moderation, prep, all of that. Now, why does this matter for workload? Why does it matter for wellbeing conversations? Let me tell you. Because once we understand that the working week is expected of 42 hours for lots of 10 weeks a year, we can now start to have better conversations around workload. Because if we are pushing expectation outside of those 42 hours a week, what we have is a workload intensification problem. Prior to stumbling upon this, it was really hard to be able to quantify what a teacher's working week should look like. And when I say teacher, I mean educator, school leader, admin, whatever that role is in under that umbrella. And that's why I always drew upon my ACT example. Now, I haven't looked at other states, and I'm not sure if these things exist for other states, but I do think this is really helpful. So if we use the 42-hour framework a week, we can start to ask better questions that help to understand expectations and responsibilities. So here are some of the questions I would ask. Am I being pushed beyond the 42-hour work week, or are my educators and people I lead being pushed beyond that 42-hour work week? If so, what is pushing us beyond that? What's making the work week more than 42 hours of work a week? Now, I want to say a 42-hour work week is like quite a lot. If we break that down across 5 days, that's averaging almost 8.5 hours a day, something like that, of work. So it is longer than the typical work day because we get these 2-week breaks in between each term. Now, another question you might ask is, if we're pushing people beyond that 42-hour work week, what can be done differently, more efficiently, or not at all, like other things we remove? Where's workload becoming excessive, and what can be reduced or redesigned or assigned in a different way? What truly matters for learning and teaching and wellbeing? What truly matters here, and perhaps what are some of the things outside of the 42-hour work week when we're doing an audit that we need to look differently around because it's creeping into personal time? Now, another reason I think this is really important is because it helps to define boundaries. And if we can't define boundaries, then we risk everything feeling like work all of the time. And I think this is really why clarity matters. And I love this example from the Queensland Teachers Union. It's very clear. A 42-hour work week, 25 hours of non-discretionary, and then you get that the rest of that, 25 hours non-discretionary, 3 hours of meetings, team meetings, whatever that might look like, and then another 14 hours of discretionary time. Now, what I also love and think is really cool is that this discretionary time they talk about is, I think, flexibility. And post-COVID, we weren't really talking about things like, as we've really started to talk about things like this. So post-COVID, with flexible working hours in other industries, people wanting to be able to work from home. And I've said for a very long time, we've always had that. We've always had this beautiful flexibility of being able to work from home outside of the typical 9 to 3, and no one really questions it. And this document from the Queensland Teachers Union unpacks it. It says it. It's right there. I think it also makes workload a bit more measurable in the sense that if it's outside of the 42-hour working week, the Queensland Teachers Union used a concept or some language called time theft. This is when we're starting to take time from personal life. So I think this is really helpful. And I think if you're struggling to put parameters around, well, what does a working week look like and how do we have a conversation around workload so that we can define what too much looks like, this is where I'd start. I'll put the links for some really helpful articles from the Queensland Teachers Union in this. Even if you're not in Queensland, it might be worth looking at, seeing if you have something similar, or just using this as a base to build a conversation. And if you are in Queensland, please be on top of this. Please refer to this, and please know that a teacher's week, we all know it and we all say it, is definitely not 25 hours or a 9 to 3 job. but it does become hard to measure workload without some parameters, and I think this document really provides it. The other thing I'm going to challenge, though, about this concept of a 42-hour week that I've said a few times is 42 hours is a lot. And I think if we were to say, okay, if we wanted to reduce that to a 35-hour working week and take, 7 hours away, would you be willing to do those 7 hours a week, which works out to be about 70 hours? So let's say a week, that would almost be, if you were to make it a 35-hour working week and you took 7 hours away a week across 10 weeks, that's 70 hours. That equates to another 2 working weeks. And so would you be willing to work 48 weeks like other professions? And this is the trade-off, yeah? The term times are intense because we get these 2-week breaks. Sometimes I think we could reduce intensification by moving some of it into term breaks, but I'll just let you ponder that and play with that and see what you think. The whole message is the better we can define some of these things as beautifully as I think this document has, the more productive and efficient and tangible and concrete our conversations around workload can be. And it removes the ambiguity of workload's too high, I work too much, work-life balance, etc., etc. We actually do need some parameters. And like I've said, I think this is a really great place to start. We'll pop the links in the show notes. And as always, we'd love to hear your feedback, your insights, your thoughts. Have you found this helpful? And if you need anything else, you know how to find us. Ta. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really do hope you have enjoyed it. The information discussed today was just that, information only. It's not specific advice. If you take action following something you heard today, it's important to make sure that you get professional advice about your unique situation before you proceed, whether that advice be legal, financial, accounting, medical, or otherwise. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or if there's anything else I can do to support your own wellbeing and wellness journey, whether it's another topic you'd like me to discuss or whether it's support in your school, workplace, or individually. And if you do know someone who might benefit from listening to this, please remember to tell them about it, share the episode with them, or suggest my Instagram, my website, or LinkedIn where they can find out more about me and what I do. And as always, I will see you in the next episode.